Steele,
No way. You're still alive.
the secrets that the traitors wanted to bury, I will make you regret.
Undercover General worked as janitor for 3 years. Then, one order changed everything. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as General Marcus Iron Wolf Steele pushed his mop bucket down the sterile corridors of Fort Bragg's command center, his weathered hands gripping the handle with the same precision he had once used to command entire divisions across 3 theaters of war. For 3 years, he had been invisible to the officers who walked past him without a second glance, their conversations about classified operations and strategic planning flowing around him like water around a stone. At 58, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned that the most important intelligence often came from the shadows, but his gray custodian's uniform and bent posture disguised one of the most decorated generals in Army history, a man whose tactical genius had shaped modern warfare and whose sacrifice for his country had cost him everything he held dear. What the ambitious young officers discussing their latest promotion schemes didn't know was that their casual disrespect and careless words were being catalogued by someone who had the power to end careers with a single phone call, and tonight that call was finally going to be made. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never see coming, and the most powerful ally is the one you never thought to respect. The classified documents scattered across Colonel Bradley's desk were clearly visible to the janitor mopping nearby. But Marcus Steele kept his eyes down and his movements methodical, listening as the arrogant officer bragged about selling military secrets to foreign contacts, while treating the invisible cleaning man like furniture. General Marcus Steele had been officially dead for 3 years, his funeral attended by presidents and foreign dignitaries, while he watched from a distance, knowing that his greatest mission required him to sacrifice not just his life, but his identity to protect the country he had served for 35 years. What began as a deep cover investigation into military corruption would become a test of everything Marcus believed about duty, honor, and the price of justice. The man who had commanded armies would discover that his greatest battle would be fought not on foreign soil, but in the halls of his own command. But what he was about to uncover would threaten the very foundation of American military security. Fort Bragg stood as the crown jewel of American military installations, its sprawling complex housing the most elite units in the Army, while serving as the nerve center for special operations around the globe. The year was 2023, and the base buzzed with the constant activity of a military at war on multiple fronts, its corridors filled with officers who carried the weight of national security on their shoulders while navigating the complex politics of military advancement. The command center, where Marcus worked each night, was the heart of this operation, its secure rooms containing secrets that could shift the balance of global power, and its personnel holding clearances that made them targets for foreign intelligence services seeking to penetrate American defenses. But beneath the surface of military precision and patriotic duty, corruption had taken root like a cancer spreading through the ranks as ambitious officers discovered that classified information could be converted into personal wealth with devastating consequences for national security and the soldiers whose lives depended on operational secrecy. Marcus Steele had built his reputation through 3 decades of flawless service, rising from enlisted man to 4-star general Through a combination of tactical brilliance, unwavering integrity, and the kind of leadership that inspired absolute loyalty from subordinates who would follow him into hell. His nickname, Iron Wolf, had come from his ability to strike swiftly and decisively while protecting his pack, leading special operations that had prevented terrorist attacks and dismantled enemy networks across 4 continents. But his greatest strength, his refusal to compromise on matters of principle, had also made him enemies among officers who valued advancement over honor and saw his moral inflexibility as a threat to their ambitions. The decision to fake his death had come after Marcus discovered evidence of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military command involving officers who were selling classified information to foreign governments, while using their positions to eliminate anyone who threatened their operation. His official death in a helicopter crash had been carefully orchestrated by a small team of loyal intelligence officers who understood that only by becoming invisible could he gather the evidence needed to expose the traitors. For 3 years, he had lived as James Morrison, a widowed janitor, whose background check revealed nothing more interesting than a spotless employment record and a preference for working night shifts. What made Marcus extraordinary wasn't just his military genius or his capacity for sacrifice, it was his ability to see patterns that others missed and his understanding that the greatest threats often came from within rather than without. His years as a janitor had taught him that invisible people heard everything and that the most valuable intelligence often came from conversations that people assumed were private. His photographic memory and decades of experience in intelligence operations made him uniquely qualified to piece together the complex web of corruption that had infected his beloved army, while his commitment to justice made him willing to risk everything to expose the truth. The central challenge facing Marcus was more complex than simply gathering evidence of corruption. He was fighting to save the soul of an institution that had defined his entire life, while knowing that his investigation could destroy the careers of officers whose families he had known for decades. The conspiracy he was uncovering involved not just financial corruption, but the systematic compromise of military operations that had cost soldiers' lives, creating a moral imperative that demanded justice regardless of the personal cost. The stakes extended far beyond individual careers to encompass national security itself, as the classified information being sold included operational plans, troop movements, and intelligence assessments that could give enemy forces decisive advantages in future conflicts. Marcus faced the impossible choice between protecting the Army's reputation and exposing the cancer that was destroying it from within, knowing that his decision would determine whether future generations of soldiers could trust their leaders to put duty before personal gain. But fate was about to test his resolve in ways he never imagined. The opportunity for Marcus to move from passive observation to active intervention came when he overheard Colonel Bradley discussing the sale of operational plans for a classified mission that would put an entire Special Forces team at risk. The conversation took place in Bradley's office at Orus 2:30 hours, when the colonel assumed the building was empty, except for the night cleaning crew, his voice carrying the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. The buyers are willing to pay $2 million for the complete operational package. Bradley told his contact over an encrypted phone, unaware that the janitor emptying his wastebasket was recording every word. Troop strength insertion routes, extraction plans, everything they need to set up an ambush that will look like intelligence failure rather than betrayal. The words hit Marcus like enemy fire, forcing him to confront the reality that his investigation had uncovered something far worse than simple corruption. It was active treason that would result in the deaths of soldiers he had trained and commanded. The mission Bradley was compromising involved a team of Rangers tasked with extracting a high-value intelligence asset from hostile territory, their success dependent on operational security that was being sold to the highest bidder. The decision to act was immediate and irrevocable, driven by the knowledge that waiting for more evidence would mean accepting the deaths of soldiers whose only crime was trusting their leaders to protect them. Marcus's strategy for exposing the conspiracy required him to balance the need for immediate action with the importance of gathering enough evidence to ensure that justice would be comprehensive rather than partial. His plan involved 3 phases: documenting the immediate threat to the Ranger mission, identifying all members of the corruption network, and coordinating with loyal officers who could act on his intelligence without compromising his cover. The preparation phase required him to access secure communication channels that he had established before his official death, contacting a small network of intelligence officers who believed in his mission and had been waiting for 3 years to receive actionable intelligence. His message was simple but urgent: Iron Wolf to Shepherd, package compromised, immediate intervention required to prevent catastrophic loss. The response came within hours, confirming that his allies were ready to act but needed specific details about the threat and the evidence required to prosecute the traitors. Marcus's challenge was to provide that information without revealing his location or compromising the investigation that had consumed 3 years of his life. The most dangerous aspect of his plan was the need to maintain his cover while actively sabotaging the conspiracy, requiring him to walk a tightrope between invisibility and action that could collapse at any moment. One mistake, one moment of recognition, and the entire operation would be compromised, allowing the traitors to escape justice while eliminating the only witness to their crimes. Marcus's first tactical move was to plant surveillance devices in Colonel Bradley's office during his regular cleaning routine, using equipment so sophisticated that it was invisible to standard security sweeps while providing real-time intelligence about the conspiracy's operations. The devices were military-grade technology that had been provided by his intelligence contacts, their installation requiring the kind of precision that only someone with his training could achieve. The intelligence he gathered over the following week painted a picture of corruption that extended far beyond Bradley to include a network of officers at multiple bases who were systematically selling classified information to foreign buyers. The scope of the operation was staggering, not just individual documents, but entire databases of sensitive information that could compromise American military operations for decades. The buyers want everything, Bradley told his contact during one recorded conversation, his voice carrying the excitement of someone who had discovered an unlimited source of income. Troop deployments, weapons, specifications, intelligence assessments, they're willing to pay premium prices for anything that gives them an advantage. The recordings provided the evidence needed to expose the conspiracy, but they also revealed the urgency of the threat. The Ranger mission was scheduled to begin in 72 hours. and Bradley had already provided enough information to ensure that the team would walk into a carefully prepared ambush. But what he discovered next would force him to break cover and risk everything. Marcus's first major challenge came when he discovered that the corruption network included officers he had personally trained and promoted, forcing him to confront the possibility that his own judgment had contributed to the crisis he was now trying to solve. Colonel Sarah Martinez, whom he had mentored during her early career, was revealed to be one of Bradley's key contacts, her access to intelligence databases making her invaluable to the conspiracy. The betrayal was personal as well as professional, challenging Marcus's faith in his ability to judge character and forcing him to question whether his years of service had created the very problems he was now fighting to eliminate. The situation escalated when Marcus learned that the conspiracy had identified a potential security leak and was actively searching for the source of their exposure, their paranoia creating a dangerous environment where any mistake could reveal his true identity. Bradley had hired private security contractors to conduct surveillance of base personnel, their investigation focusing on anyone with access to the areas where sensitive conversations had taken place. Marcus found himself under scrutiny from professionals who were trained to detect exactly the kind of deception he was practicing, forcing him to modify his behavior while maintaining his cover as a simple janitor. The third challenge emerged when Marcus discovered that the conspiracy extended beyond simple financial corruption to include the deliberate sabotage of military operations that had resulted in American casualties, transforming his investigation from a matter of justice to one of vengeance. The evidence revealed that previous intelligence failures that had cost soldiers' lives were actually the result of information being sold to enemy forces, their deaths serving as cover for the traitor's activities. The knowledge that his former subordinates had died because of betrayal rather than bad luck or enemy skill created a personal motivation that threatened to compromise his professional objectivity. The pressure intensified when Marcus learned that the Ranger mission he was trying to protect had been moved up by 24 hours, reducing his window for intervention while increasing the urgency of his need to act without compromising his investigation. The mission commander, Major David Chin, was someone Marcus had served with during his official career, a competent officer who trusted his superiors and had no reason to suspect that his operational security had been compromised. The conspiracy's security measures were becoming more sophisticated as they sensed the threat to their operation, with Bradley implementing new protocols that limited access to sensitive information while increasing surveillance of base personnel. Marcus found himself walking through a minefield of suspicion and paranoia, where any deviation from his established routine could trigger an investigation that would expose his true identity. The most dangerous pressure came from his own emotions as he struggled to maintain the passive role of observer while watching preparations for a mission that he knew would end in disaster. Every hour that passed brought the Rangers closer to an ambush that would cost lives, while every action he took to prevent it increased the risk of exposure that could compromise the larger investigation and allow the conspiracy to escape justice. The breakthrough in Marcus's understanding of his mission came when he realized that his 3 years of invisibility had taught him more about leadership than his 30 years of command, showing him that true authority came not from rank or recognition, but from the willingness to serve others regardless of personal cost. His time as a janitor had stripped away the external markers of success and forced him to confront the essential question of what it meant to be a soldier when no one was watching. "I used to think leadership was about giving orders," he wrote in his encrypted journal, the words visible only to intelligence contacts who monitored his communications. But watching these officers abuse their authority while ignoring their responsibilities has taught me that real leadership is about taking responsibility for others even when no one will ever know you did it. The transformation wasn't just philosophical, but practical, as Marcus learned to exercise influence through information rather than authority, protecting soldiers through intelligence rather than direct command. His ability to affect outcomes while remaining invisible had become a new form of leadership that was perhaps more powerful than any he had practiced during his official career. The situation reached a critical juncture when Marcus intercepted communications indicating that the conspiracy had identified him as a potential threat, their investigation focusing on the night cleaning crew as the most likely source of their security breach. Bradley's paranoia had reached the point where he was considering extreme measures to protect the operation, including the elimination of anyone who might have overheard sensitive conversations. "We can't afford any loose ends," Bradley told his security contractor during a conversation that Marcus recorded from an adjacent office, the words carrying the unmistakable threat of violence. "The janitor has been here for 3 years, and he's always around when we're having important discussions. Maybe it's time for him to have an accident." The threat forced Marcus to confront the possibility that his cover was blown and that continuing the investigation would require him to abandon the passive role he had maintained for 3 years. The Rangers were scheduled to begin their mission in 18 hours, while the conspiracy was planning to eliminate him within the next 24 hours, creating a convergence of threats that would require him to choose between maintaining his cover and saving lives. The moment of truth was approaching when General Marcus Steele would have to decide whether to remain James Morrison the janitor or reclaim his identity as Iron Wolf the warrior. And then everything began to fall apart. The crisis exploded when Marcus discovered that the conspiracy had not only identified him as a security threat, but had also accelerated their timeline planning to eliminate him while simultaneously ensuring that the Ranger mission would proceed as scheduled into what they knew was a carefully prepared ambush. The convergence of threats came at 0300 hours, when Bradley's security contractor, a former Special Forces operator named Vincent Kane, cornered Marcus in the supply closet where he had been hiding surveillance equipment. "I know who you are, General," Kane said, his voice carrying the cold professionalism of someone who had killed before and would kill again without hesitation. Marcus "Iron Wolf" Steele, officially dead for 3 years, but very much alive and very much in the way of a profitable operation. The question is whether you're going to come quietly or whether we're going to have to make this messy. The confrontation forced Marcus to abandon 3 years of careful planning and patient investigation, his cover blown at the worst possible moment, when the Rangers were already in transit to their mission, and the evidence he had gathered was still insufficient to expose the full scope of the conspiracy. The choice he faced was between surrendering to protect his investigation and fighting to save the lives of soldiers who were walking into a trap that he had been unable to prevent. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the authority that 3 years of invisibility hadn't been able to completely suppress. "This conspiracy goes deeper than you know, and the people you're working for will eliminate you the moment you become inconvenient." But Cain wasn't interested in conversation, and the sound of his weapon being drawn echoed through the small space like a death sentence for both Marcus's investigation and the Rangers, who were depending on intelligence that would never reach them. The moment of truth came when Marcus was forced to choose between maintaining his cover and saving the lives of soldiers who were walking into an ambush that would be blamed on intelligence failure rather than deliberate betrayal. The decision was complicated by the knowledge that revealing his identity would compromise 3 years of investigation while potentially allowing the larger conspiracy to escape justice. But the alternative was accepting the deaths of Rangers who had trusted their leaders to protect them. "You can kill me," Marcus told Cain, his hands raised, but his voice steady, with the confidence of someone who had faced death many times before. "But you can't stop what's already in motion. My people know about the conspiracy, and they're already moving to protect the Rangers and arrest the traitors." The bluff was partially true. His intelligence contacts were aware of the threat, but lacked the specific details needed to act decisively, while the Rangers were already committed to a mission that would begin in less than 12 hours. The success of his deception would determine whether he lived long enough to save the mission and expose the conspiracy, or whether his 3 years of sacrifice would end in failure and the deaths of soldiers he had sworn to protect. Cain's response revealed the depth of the conspiracy's desperation and the lengths they were willing to go to protect their operation. "Your people don't know anything, General. We've been monitoring their communications for months, and we know exactly how isolated you are. Nobody's coming to save you, and nobody's going to save those Rangers." The words confirmed Marcus's worst fears about the scope of the conspiracy, while also revealing that his investigation had been compromised from the beginning, forcing him to confront the possibility that his 3 years of careful work had been nothing more than an elaborate trap designed to neutralize the one person who could expose the truth. The turning point came when Marcus realized that his greatest weapon wasn't the evidence he had gathered or the allies he had cultivated, but the reputation and relationships he had built during 30 years of honorable service. The conspiracy had made a fatal error in assuming that his official death had severed all connections to the soldiers who had served under him, forgetting that loyalty to Iron Wolf extended far beyond official channels and military hierarchy. "Cain," Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded armies, "you're about to learn the difference between a contractor and a soldier. I may be officially dead, but my people are very much alive, and they've been waiting 3 years for me to give them a target." The words were followed by the sound of tactical teams breaching the building, their coordinated assault revealing that Marcus's intelligence network had been more extensive and more loyal than the conspiracy had realized. The investigation that had seemed compromised was actually the foundation for a counter-operation that had been years in the making, with Iron Wolf's pack finally ready to hunt. This was the moment when everything depended on a single decision. The preparation for Marcus's most important operation began not with tactical planning, but with a single encrypted message that he transmitted using equipment hidden in his janitor's cart. Iron Wolf to all shepherds. The pack is compromised, but the hunt continues. Execute Lazarus Protocol immediately. The message activated a network of loyal officers and intelligence operatives who had been waiting 3 years for confirmation that their general was alive and ready to complete his mission. Within minutes, the response came from multiple sources. Shepherds ready, Rangers diverted to safe house, targets identified and surrounded, awaiting final orders. The coordination was flawless, the result of years of preparation and the kind of loyalty that transcended official death and military hierarchy. Marcus's role shifted from passive observer to active commander, as he coordinated the simultaneous arrest of conspiracy members across multiple bases, while ensuring that the Ranger mission was aborted before the team could walk into the prepared ambush. The operation required split-second timing and absolute trust between people who had been separated for years, but who still functioned as a unified force. This is Iron Wolf. Marcus transmitted to the Ranger team leader using authentication codes that only Major Chen would recognize. Mission is compromised. Execute emergency extraction immediately. Trust no one except Shepard assets. The tension reached its peak as Marcus coordinated multiple operations while still maintaining his confrontation with Kane, who had become increasingly desperate as he realized that the conspiracy he had been hired to protect was collapsing around him. The sound of tactical teams moving through the building created a backdrop of controlled chaos while Marcus worked to ensure that no evidence was destroyed and no conspirators escaped. "You think you've won," Kane said, his weapon still trained on Marcus, but his voice carrying the uncertainty of someone who had lost control of the situation. "But this goes higher than you know. Eliminating Bradley and Martinez won't stop what's coming." The words confirmed Marcus's suspicions that the conspiracy extended beyond the officers he had identified, but they also revealed that Kane knew more about the operation than he had initially admitted. The interrogation that followed would be crucial to understanding the full scope of the threat and ensuring that justice was comprehensive rather than partial. "Then you're going to tell me everything," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had returned from the dead to settle accounts. "Starting with who's really running this operation and ending with how many soldiers have died because of your greed." The coordinated arrests began at exactly 400 hours across multiple military installations, with tactical teams simultaneously apprehending conspiracy members while securing evidence that would ensure successful prosecutions. Colonel Bradley was taken into custody in his quarters, his computer and files seized before he could destroy evidence of his treasonous activities, while Colonel Martinez was arrested at her office as she attempted to delete classified databases. "This is General Marcus Steele, officially returning to active duty," Marcus announced over the base communications system, his voice carrying across Fort Bragg with the authority that had been silent for 3 years. "All personnel involved in the unauthorized sale of classified information are hereby ordered to surrender immediately. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." The announcement sent shockwaves through the base as officers who had believed Iron Wolf was dead realized that their most legendary general had been watching them from the shadows, cataloging their crimes and preparing for this moment of reckoning. The complications arose when several conspiracy members attempted to escape or destroy evidence, their desperate actions revealing the true scope of the operation while creating dangerous situations that required immediate tactical response. Major Thompson, whom Marcus had not previously identified as a conspirator, barricaded himself in the communications center and began transmitting classified information to foreign contacts in a final act of defiance. "Iron Wolf, this is Shepherd 6, came the report from the tactical team leader. "Target is attempting to upload classified databases to external servers. We need immediate authorization to breach and neutralize." The situation required Marcus to balance the need to prevent further intelligence compromise with the importance of taking Thompson alive for interrogation, his decision complicated by the knowledge that the communications center contained equipment that could be damaged by aggressive tactical action. Breach and secure. Marcus ordered, his voice carrying the weight of command authority that had been dormant for 3 years. Priority is preventing data transmission. Lethal force is authorized if necessary to protect national security. The assault that followed was swift and professional, with Thompson surrendering when faced with overwhelming tactical superiority and the realization that his escape routes had been eliminated. The decisive moment came when Marcus confronted Colonel Bradley in the detention facility, their conversation revealing the personal motivations that had driven the conspiracy while providing the final pieces of evidence needed to understand the full scope of the operation. Bradley's arrogance had been replaced by desperation as he realized that his carefully constructed network had been dismantled by the man he had assumed was dead. "You destroyed everything," Bradley said, his voice carrying the bitterness of someone who had lost a fortune and a future. "Do you have any idea how much money you've cost us? How many opportunities you've eliminated?" Marcus's response revealed the depth of his anger and the strength of his commitment to justice. "I know exactly how much you've cost us, Bradley. 12 soldiers dead in operations that were compromised by your greed. Hundreds of classified operations exposed to enemy forces. The trust of allies damaged by intelligence failures that were actually acts of treason." The interrogation that followed provided the evidence needed to identify the foreign contacts who had been purchasing American military secrets while Bradley's cooperation was secured through the promise of life imprisonment rather than execution for treason. The information he provided would lead to additional arrests and the recovery of classified materials that had been sold to hostile governments. "You want to know the real irony?" Marcus asked as the interrogation concluded. "I've been cleaning your office for 3 years, listening to every conversation, recording every transaction. You never saw me because you never learned to see the people who serve while you only served yourself. The breakthrough came when the full scope of the conspiracy was revealed through the combined evidence gathered during Marcus's 3-year investigation and the intelligence provided by arrested conspirators seeking to reduce their sentences. The operation had involved not just the sale of classified information, but the deliberate sabotage of military operations to create intelligence failures that would justify increased defense spending and provide cover for additional treasonous activities. "The corruption went deeper than we imagined," Marcus reported to the Secretary of Defense during a secure video conference that officially restored him to active duty. "This wasn't just about money. It was about systematically weakening American military effectiveness while profiting from the chaos they created. The evidence led to a complete restructuring of military intelligence protocols and the implementation of new security measures designed to prevent similar conspiracies from taking root. Marcus's investigation had not only exposed the immediate threat, but had provided the foundation for reforms that would protect American military operations for decades to come. The Rangers, who had been saved from the ambush, were never told the full details of their rescue, but they understood that someone had been watching over them when their leaders had failed to protect them. The immediate impact of Operation Lazarus was felt throughout the military establishment as the scope of the conspiracy became clear and the reforms necessary to prevent similar betrayals were implemented. Marcus's return from the dead became a symbol of the military's commitment to rooting out corruption while honoring the service of those who sacrificed everything for their country. The janitor's uniform that had been his disguise for 3 years was retired to his personal collection, a reminder that the most important battles were often fought by those who remained invisible while others claimed the glory. But the story didn't end there. The immediate aftermath of Marcus's investigation brought changes that extended far beyond the prosecution of individual conspirators to encompass a fundamental restructuring of military security protocols and intelligence oversight. The evidence he had gathered led to the conviction of 17 officers on charges ranging from treason to conspiracy, while the foreign intelligence networks that had been purchasing American secrets were dismantled through coordinated international operations. The reforms implemented in response to his investigation included new protocols for handling classified information, enhanced background checks for personnel with security clearances, and the establishment of independent oversight committees designed to detect and prevent corruption before it could compromise military operations. Marcus's 3 years of invisible service had provided the foundation for changes that would protect American soldiers for generations to come. The soldiers whose lives had been saved by his intervention never learned the full details of their rescue, but they understood that someone had been watching over them when their leaders had failed in their duty to protect those under their command. The long-term impact of Marcus's investigation extended throughout the military establishment and into civilian oversight of defense operations, creating new standards for accountability and transparency that honored the service of those who sacrificed everything for their country. His example inspired a new generation of officers who understood that true leadership meant serving others regardless of personal recognition or reward. The Iron Wolf Protocol became standard procedure for investigating suspected corruption in military ranks, combining traditional intelligence gathering with the kind of patient observation that Marcus had perfected during his years as a janitor. His methods were taught in intelligence schools and staff colleges as examples of how dedication to duty could overcome any obstacle when guided by unwavering moral principles. The foundation he established provided support for military families affected by corruption and betrayal, while his annual lectures at military academies reminded future officers that their greatest responsibility was to the soldiers who trusted them with their lives. The man who had been officially dead for 3 years had become Marcus's transformation from invisible janitor back to respected general was complete but ongoing, requiring daily choices to honor the lessons he had learned during his years of service in the shadows. His relationship with the military had deepened beyond the bonds of duty to encompass a spiritual understanding of what it meant to serve others without expectation of recognition or reward. The man who had once commanded through authority had learned to lead through example, while the general who had been defined by his rank had discovered that his greatest strength lay in his willingness to become invisible when the mission required it. Marcus's story became a testament to the power of patient service, the importance of moral courage in the face of institutional corruption, and the truth that the greatest leaders were often those who served without recognition or reward. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never see coming, and the most powerful ally is the one you never thought to respect. He would tell audiences of young officers, knowing that his greatest victory was not the conspiracy he had exposed, but the trust he had restored in the institution he had served his entire life.